The white dress was still in its garment bag in my car. I hadn't even bothered to put it on. The third time your fiancé doesn't show up to sign the marriage license, you stop dressing for the occasion. You just drive to the courthouse in your jeans, your hands steady on the steering wheel, telling yourself this is the last time. This is absolutely the last time. My name is Sarah. I was 31 years old, a pediatric nurse who had spent 6 years loving a man named Derek, 6 years of canceled plans, convincing myself he was just commitment shy, 6 years of my mother's tight-lipped silence every time his name came up at dinner. The first time Derek didn't show, he texted me 40 minutes after our appointment that he'd gotten stuck in a work meeting. The second time, 8 months later, he called crying, saying he'd panicked, that he loved me but needed more time. I gave him more time. I gave him 1.5 years more. And then I drove to the courthouse on a Tuesday morning in October, alone, to meet him for our third scheduled appointment with the clerk. I sat on the wooden bench outside room 104 for 52 minutes. I know because I watched the minute hand on the wall clock the way you watch a pot that refuses to boil. At minute 43, I texted him. At minute 48, I called. By minute 52, I already knew. I just hadn't admitted it to myself yet. The clerk who finally opened the door to ask if I was waiting for someone was a woman named Gloria, mid-50s, reading glasses pushed up on her head, the kind of woman who had clearly seen everything this building had to offer. She looked at me, looked at the empty bench beside me, and did the math without asking a single question. "Honey," she said, "is this your first time here or your third?" I laughed. I don't know why. It wasn't funny. "Third," I said. She pressed her lips together. Then she nodded slowly toward the row of chairs along the opposite wall, where a man was sitting with his forearms on his knees, staring at his phone like it had personally wronged him. He was maybe 34, dark hair, wearing a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, dressed like someone who had also made an effort for an occasion that hadn't materialized. "That one over there," Gloria said, lowering her voice just enough, "has been waiting since 9 this morning. Fiancé sent a text at 9:47. Said she'd eloped with his business partner in Cancun." She paused. "I probably shouldn't have told you that." "You definitely shouldn't have," I agreed. She shrugged. "I've been working this desk for 22 years. You know what I've learned? The ones who show up alone always deserved better than the ones who didn't show up." She looked at me, then back at him. "Seems like a waste. 2 perfectly functional adults, all this paperwork already pulled." She smiled at her own joke. "I'm kidding. Mostly." She went back inside. I sat there for another minute. Then, because I had nothing left to lose and nowhere particular to be, and because 6 years of careful, sensible decision-making had gotten me exactly this far, I picked up my bag and walked across the hall and sat down 2 seats away from him. He looked up. "Your fiancé took off with your business partner," I said. "My fiancé didn't come. This is my 3rd attempt." He stared at me. His eyes were dark brown, and he looked less like a man who had been humiliated and more like a man who was tired in a way that went past this particular morning. "3 times, he said. 3 times. He nodded slowly. "Marcus texted me a photo. They're at a resort. He used our company credit card." He held up his phone briefly, then put it back down. "I'm Owen." "Sarah." We sat in silence for a moment. Down the hall, a door opened and closed. Someone's heels clicked against the tile floor. "That clerk in there told me I should marry you," I said. To be clear, she was joking. Was she? I'm about 60% sure. Owen looked at the door to room 104. Then he looked back at me. He had the particular expression of a man running calculations, not romantic calculations, not yet, but something more practical. The expression of someone who has had the floor pulled out from under him and is deciding in real time whether to keep standing or sit all the way down. "I have an appointment in 20 minutes that I no longer have a reason to keep," he said. "You probably do too." "I do." "So we could leave." He paused. Or, I said. Neither of us said anything for 10 seconds. Then he stood up, straightened his shirt, and walked to the door of room 104 and knocked twice. When Gloria opened it, he said, "Ma'am, I think we'd like to use our appointments after all." Gloria looked at him, looked past him at me, looked back at him. "Together?" she said. "If that's allowed." "It's a courthouse, sweetheart," she said. "I've seen stranger things." She pushed her glasses up and opened the door wider. "Come on in." 45 minutes later, I was married to a man I had known for exactly 1 hour. I want to be honest about what those first weeks were. They were not romantic. They were not a movie montage. Owen and I had exchanged numbers in the parking lot, agreed on a few basic facts. We would tell people the truth if directly asked. We would not make any major decisions about the arrangement for at least 30 days. We would treat the whole thing as a contract between two adults who had both, in the same morning, run out of patience for their previous lives. He was a structural engineer. He had spent 4 years building a small firm with Marcus, his now former business partner and, apparently, his now former best friend. The company was called Kellerman Park, and as of that Tuesday morning, Owen had no idea what it even was anymore. I found this out over coffee the following Saturday at a place near my apartment, the first of what became a weekly check-in that neither of us had officially proposed but both of us kept showing up for. "Do you hate him?" I asked, meaning Marcus. "I did. For about the first 3 days," he said. "Now I mostly just feel stupid. I missed things I shouldn't have missed." He wrapped both hands around his mug. "What about Derek?" "Derek is the kind of person who genuinely believes his own excuses," I said. "He probably thinks he did me a favor." I looked out the window at the October Street. The worst part is I think I knew. I think I knew for at least 2 years, and I just kept deciding not to know. Owen was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." That was the moment, not the courthouse, not the signatures, not the awkward explanation to Gloria about whether we wanted witnesses. That was the moment I thought, okay, maybe this person is someone I can talk to. My best friend Renata had approximately 1,000 questions. Renata had been my closest friend since college, a high school history teacher who approached every situation in my life with the energy of someone grading a paper she expected to be troubled by. When I told her what I'd done, she put down her fork, looked at me for a long time, and then said, "Sarah Marie Chen, I have known you for 11 years and I did not see that coming." "I didn't either," I said. "Is he a serial killer?" "He's a structural engineer. Those aren't mutually exclusive." But she came around, slowly. She met Owen for dinner 6 weeks in, and I watched her run him through the particular Renata gauntlet, pointed questions disguised as casual conversation, and I watched him answer everything directly without performing. He didn't try to charm her, he just talked to her like a person. I saw her reassess him 3 times over the course of the meal, and by the end of the night she had decided he was acceptable, which from Renata was essentially a standing ovation. My mother's reaction was harder. My mother, who had come to this country from Taiwan at 26 with my father and built a life through sheer precision of effort, did not respond well to impulsive decisions. She had bitten her tongue through 6 years of Derek. When I told her what had happened at the courthouse, the silence on the phone lasted long enough that I checked to make sure the call was still connected. "You married a stranger," she finally said. "I married someone who was also having a very bad morning." "Sarah." "Mom, I know. Does he have family?" "He has a younger sister. His parents are in Oregon." Another silence, then carefully, "Is he kind to you?" I thought about the Saturday coffees. The way he had texted me the night before my first day back at work after everything, just a single message that said, "How are you actually doing?" Not "how are you," but "actually," which was the word that mattered. "Yes," I said. "He's kind to me." She exhaled. "Then we'll see," she said, which was my mother's version of an open door. The problem arrived in the form of Derek, because of course it did. He showed up at the hospital where I worked on a Wednesday afternoon in December, standing near the parking structure entrance with his hands in his jacket pockets, and that particular expression he wore when he wanted something and was deciding how to ask for it. I saw him before he saw me. I had about 4 seconds to decide whether to keep walking. I kept walking. "Sarah," he said, "can we just talk for a minute? I have a shift starting in 20 minutes. "I know. He fell into step beside me. "I heard you got married. I needed to hear it from you." I stopped. I turned and looked at him, really. Looked at him for the first time in 2 months. He looked fine. He always looked fine. That had been part of the problem. "Derek, I waited for you 3 times. "I know. You didn't show up 3 times. "I know that too." He had the grace at least to look away. "I'm not saying I handled it right. I'm just saying I didn't expect you to." "To what? Move on? Make a decision?" I kept my voice level. My hands were completely still at my sides. "You made your decision 6 years ago. You just kept making it over and over." I finally made mine. He looked at me. Something moved across his face that might have been genuine feeling, or might have been the performance of it. I had spent long enough with Derek that I genuinely couldn't tell anymore, and that told me everything I needed to know. "Is he good to you?" he asked. The same question my mother had asked. The coincidence of it almost made me smile. "Yes," I said. "He is." I adjusted the strap of my bag. "I have to go." I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 3 weeks later, Owen called me from his office at 7 in the evening, and I could tell from the first syllable that something was wrong. He had found out that Derek and Marcus, who had apparently known each other through a mutual professional connection, had been talking, comparing notes. Marcus, who was back in the city by then and in the middle of a legal dispute with Owen over the business, had apparently told Derek several things about Owen's company finances that he had no right to disclose, and Derek had used that information to contact 2 of Owen's current clients and suggest that the firm was in unstable shape. I sat on my couch and listened to Owen explain this and felt a specific kind of cold fury, the kind that doesn't shake, the kind that sits very still. "They don't know each other," I said. "They do now. 6 degrees, apparently." His voice was careful, controlled. "I found out from one of the clients. She called me as a courtesy. She wanted to know if it was true." "Is it?" "No. Flat. Direct. The company is in transition because Marcus pulled out. That's different from instability. We're restructuring, not collapsing." But the implication was enough to make her nervous, and nervous clients call other clients. I set down my mug. "Owen, I'm handling it. I know you're handling it. I'm asking if you're okay." A pause. "No," he said. "Not particularly." Another pause. "Thank you for asking." What followed was 2 months that I would not wish on anyone. Marcus had retained an attorney and was claiming a larger share of the company's early assets than their original agreement supported. Derek, after our parking lot conversation, had decided that the best way to process his feelings was to interfere in a situation he had created by his own absence. My mother called every Sunday. Renata texted me daily updates from her classroom, like dispatches from a parallel universe where the biggest problem was a student who had plagiarized a paper on the Civil War. Through all of it, Owen and I were building something. I'm not sure when it shifted from a contract between 2 adults into something that kept me up at night in a different way, not with worry, but with a feeling I hadn't had in a long time, which was the feeling of looking forward to talking to someone. He made me laugh without trying to. He remembered things I mentioned once and asked about them weeks later. He was methodical about problems in a way that should have been irritating but was, instead, deeply comforting. When I had a bad week at the hospital, a patient I'd been rooting for, a night shift that left me sitting in my car for 10 minutes before I could make myself drive, he brought dinner to my apartment without being asked. He sat on my couch and we watched a terrible documentary about competitive cheesemaking, and he never once asked me to explain what I was feeling. I was falling in love with my own husband, and I found the whole situation genuinely absurd. The legal matter resolved the way these things often do, expensively and slowly, and then, all at once. Owen's attorney established that Marcus's claims were beyond what their founding documents supported. The evidence was clear. The judge was unimpressed with Marcus's argument. The company reorganized as Owen's sole proprietorship, and 2 of the clients who had been contacted by Derek actually returned after speaking directly with Owen, because Owen was, as it turned out, exactly as straightforward in a conference room as he was everywhere else. Derek sent me an email in February. It was long. It acknowledged what he'd done with Marcus, said it had been a mistake driven by feelings he hadn't processed, expressed something in the vicinity of an apology. I read it twice. I closed the laptop. I didn't respond, not because I was punishing him, but because I genuinely had nothing to say that would serve either of us. Some chapters end not with a confrontation, but with a door clicking quietly shut. The harder thing, the thing I hadn't expected, was my own grief. Not for Derek specifically, but for the version of my life I had planned. 31 years old, and I was starting over from a courthouse, and some mornings that felt like freedom, and some mornings it felt like standing at the edge of something with no railing. I talked about this with Owen one evening in March. We were sitting at his kitchen table, which had become a kind of neutral territory where we did our most honest talking, and I told him that I was happy, that I was genuinely, surprisingly happy, and also that I sometimes felt like I was grieving something I couldn't quite name. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think you're grieving the certainty, not the person, the idea that you knew how things were going to go." I looked at him across the table. Because that's what I lost, he said. Not Marcus, not the business the way it was. The feeling that I understood the situation, that I had read it correctly. He turned his coffee cup in a slow circle. Turns out I'm okay at my job, but I'm bad at assuming I know what's coming. You married me in 45 minutes, I said. That was the most accurate read I've made in years. He wasn't looking at me with performance. He wasn't saying it to be charming. He was just stating what he believed to be true, in the same tone he would use to describe a load-bearing wall. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine, and he turned his palm up and held on. Spring came. Owen's firm took on 3 new projects. I was offered a lead position on a new pediatric care initiative at the hospital, and I took it. Renata got engaged to a philosophy professor she'd been seeing for 2 years, and she asked me to be her maid of honor, and then immediately said, "And yes, Owen is invited, obviously. The man passed my test. He gets to come to things." My mother came to visit in April. She stayed for 4 days. On the first evening, she made her Taiwanese braised pork over rice and set it on Owen's kitchen table, our table. By that point, Owen ate 2 servings and asked her how she made the sauce, and she gave him approximately 20% of the actual recipe and watched him carefully while he listened. On the 4th morning, as I drove her to the airport, she said, "He's serious." "Yes," I said. "He looks at you like he's paying attention." "He does." She adjusted her seatbelt, looked out the window. "Good," she said. I thought about Gloria sometimes. I didn't have a way to reach her, didn't even know her last name. Just a woman at a desk on the 2nd floor of a courthouse who had made one mildly inappropriate comment to a stranger on a bad morning and set something in motion that she would never know about. I thought about what she'd said, that the ones who show up alone always deserved better, and I thought she was probably right, but I also thought that it was more than that. It wasn't just about deserving better. It was about what you decide to do with the morning after everything you expected doesn't come. Some people go home. Some people sit on a bench and watch the clock. And some people, on a particular Tuesday in October, pick up their bag and walk across a hallway and say the most honest thing they've said in years to a man who is also, it turns out, tired in exactly the right way. Owen proposed in June. We were in the parking lot of a hardware store, which is where we had gone because the kitchen faucet was leaking, and we had been arguing companionably about whether to replace the whole fixture or just the cartridge, and he stopped in the middle of the parking lot and said, "I want to actually be married to you. Not for the contract. Because I want to." I looked at him in the flat afternoon light, in the parking lot of a hardware store, and I thought about the courthouse bench and the wall clock and Gloria's reading glasses and the 6 years before and the 8 months since. "I already am married to you," I said. "I want you to choose it," he said, deliberately, not because we were both having a terrible morning. I looked at him for a long moment. "We should replace the whole fixture," I said. He waited. "Yes," I said. "Obviously yes." He didn't have a ring. We bought the faucet fixture and drove home and fixed the leak, and then we called my mother and Renata and Owen's sister and his parents in Oregon, and everyone had the same response in different words, which was some version of course, finally, yes. Gloria had been joking, mostly. But I have thought about her a lot in the year since, and I think about what it means to make a decision when all the certainty has been stripped away, when you are sitting on a courthouse bench with nothing left of what you planned and nothing ahead that you can see clearly. I think about the fact that sometimes the most deliberate choice you ever make is the one that looks, from the outside, like the least deliberate one. That sometimes the universe does not give you a clear road and a green light and a fiancé who shows up on time. Sometimes it gives you an empty bench and a woman with reading glasses and a stranger across the hall who is also, it turns out, tired of making the wrong choice. I showed up to the courthouse 3 times for the wrong person. The 4th time I showed up for myself, and he was already there.